us tonight for the very first of our three-part webinar series of Feeding Your Way to Pregnancy. Tonight's webinar is going to be how nutrition can affect your reproductive success. My name is Mandy Wilkins, and I am the Regional Sales Manager for Triple Crown Nutrition based here in Colorado. We are coming to you tonight from the labs of MPTI here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I'm here with the staff from MPTI, and Dr. Bill Vandergrift is joining us as well on this call. You'll have plenty of time to ask questions tonight. We'll ask those in the chat section of it, so please feel free to go ahead and ask those, and we'll get to them at the end of this chat. So I will let Lisa introduce her crew.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lisa Herickhoff from Membrane Protective Technologies, as you can see from above me. And we are a company located in Fort Collins focusing on three things. First, improving technologies so that sperm that are taken out of the body and oocytes that are taken out of the body can survive that process more appropriately and better, so that you get better pregnancy at the end. Secondly, we do quality control testing on sperm cells to make sure that you have a better chance of breeding success through understanding what you're putting into that mare. And then lastly, we do cryopreservation services for goats and sheep. So I have with me today one of our esteemed employees, Myles Shepherd. Myles is an almost PhD.
Yes, so I'm currently a PhD candidate at Colorado State University, but I have been with MPTI for a little over 4 years. I am involved with a lot of projects that we've done throughout the years here at MPTI. So yeah, it's a pretty great opportunity for us to be here to talk to you guys tonight about nutrition and reproduction.
And behind the scenes, we have Amy Scharf, who has her master's degree in, very good, you see the hand, has her master's degree in artificial reproductive technologies or assisted reproductive technologies, focusing largely on the embryo side. So you're going to hear from Amy in the third webinar. So.
Awesome, and we're joined by Dr. Bill Vandergrift. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Bill.
Okay, thank you, Mandy. I'm actually joining you from Georgia, so we're covering many states here tonight. I am an independent equine nutritional consultant. I've been doing this for almost 40 years. I am the nutritional consultant for Triple Crown and formulate all of the Triple Crown feeds and forages. But my wife and I, we discontinued a few years ago, but we used to run a thoroughbred breeding farm in central Kentucky. And so we're very familiar with getting mares bred and raising foals. And I also work with stallion stations literally around the world. So hopefully I can, bring some nutritional facts to you, as well as share some of the experiences that I've had, what worked, and in all honesty, what did not work in terms of breeding. And hopefully we can all learn something tonight.
Awesome, thank you, Bill. So tonight's discussion is going to be a little roundtable discussion. We have some questions that we've already come up with to ask our experts here. And again, feel free to ask any questions in the chat as well. So the first question that I have tonight, this one will go to Bill. Bill, why does nutrition matter to my breeding program?
Well, obviously being a nutritionist, I put a lot of emphasis, on nutrition, both for the mare and the stallion. But I like to kind of approach it from this angle. If we consider how horses evolved, and their breeding success in their natural environment. Some years where nutrients were scarce, breeding success was down. In years where nutrition was adequate or nutrition was good because of adequate rainfall and so forth, then the breeding rate of these horses improved. So obviously, that fact alone should tell us that nutrition has a central determining factor on the success of any breeding program and breeding success. But generally speaking, nutrition will affect the cycling ability of the mare. It will affect the quality of the embryos or the quality of the follicles that are formed. It'll affect the quality of the embryos. It'll affect the quality of the semen. And so without proper nutrition, you're really limiting your success. And so we're going to, discuss tonight essentially what you can do to ensure that your nutrition program is adequate. And by ensuring that, then you improve your success rate.
Awesome. What about you guys?
So I think, one of the things that we think about is separating this by stallion and mare. I mean, they're going to have slightly different demands for nutrition. But before we get there, I think it's important to mention that body condition score is going to play a huge role in your success here. I mean, for stallions, it's going to affect morphology. It's going to affect libido. And for mares, it can affect your estrus length, your ovulation time, your oocyte quality as well.
Awesome. So, and that kind of leads to our next question too.
Well, and I think going on that, and before we jump into the next question, I think it's important to remember these horses have a simple stomach, so they literally are what they eat. And so, yeah, it's going to affect every part of your body, including your reproductive organs or your horse's reproductive organs.
Yep. I think you mentioned body condition score, and that is extremely important, and obviously that relates to nutrition. So, in determining body condition score, you can be as, shall we say, as detailed as you want, using the Herickhoff body condition score, which, by the way, was developed at Texas A&M many years ago, actually, and I am a Texas Aggie, and I knew Don Herickhoff personally, so this is all very familiar to me. But we can body condition score on a scale of 1 to 9. We can also use a very simple body condition score using she's too skinny, she's just right, she's too fat. Okay. So, and somewhere in between. But I think what we need to understand with body condition score is that, mares tend to have what we refer to as a set point in terms of when they become fertile in relation to their body condition score. I mentioned, we talked about why is nutrition important, and I mentioned that as horses evolved, if, we had or they experienced a drought and available feed sources were scarce, obviously that meant that they would lose body condition. They would become skinny. And it was the body condition then that actually limited their fertility. And some of the research that's been done has essentially demonstrated that for most mares, they will become fertile somewhere between a body condition score of 4 and 5. And so if you've got a mare that's only got a body condition score of 3, the chances of her successfully becoming pregnant are not very good. Now, that being said, some of you in the audience may be thinking, well, what about these rescue mares that are nothing but skin and bones, and we get them home and begin to feed them and we realize they're pregnant? How did that happen? Well, it's a question of odds. We're not saying that if a mare's a body condition score of 3, there's no way, Jose, that she's going to get pregnant. It's just that if you're running a breeding program and you want to improve your chances that your mare is going to get pregnant, in that case, then you want to make sure that her body condition score is 4 or above. And what we normally say is we like them to be around 5 or 6. And you see the diagram on the screen, but in simple terms, I describe it this way. You want your mare in a body condition such that you can't see her ribs, but if you take your fingertips and rub them across the center of her rib cage, you can feel her ribs fairly easily. If you find that you have to start pressing very hard in order to feel the ribs, you're probably looking at a body condition score of 7 or above, in which case she's getting a little bit on the heavy side. So if we keep our mayors somewhere around 5 to 6 on this Herickhoff body condition score, you're going to find that your breeding or your chances of breeding success are going to improve significantly.
Similarly, Bill, on the stallion side, if we end up with those stallions that are in the 7s, 8s, and 9s, we start to see problems with sperm quality that we'll talk about in the next session. But we start to see things like droplets that form on the sperm cell that can impair their motility and have other downstream impacts. So, you know, you have similar kind of issues. Also, you can get a lot of fat buildup around the scrotum, and that can affect temperature regulation of that scrotum, and that's not a positive either. So, you know, you have not only we're going to worry about it on the mare side, but we need to think about the stallion side as well. And if he's too fat, he's not going to be happy to service his mares probably either.
It's probably making it harder for him to mount those mares or the dummy too, in order to collect on from him.
That's right. That's right.
A lot harder on his body as well.
Yes. Yeah. Harder on joints, and same issues we have with humans, right?
So Bill, the next question I have is, how can I help improve my chances of breeding success?
Well, I guess you're directing that one towards me, Mandy?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one thing we have to keep in mind is that even though we talked about, you know, mares having a set point in terms of body condition score and breeding success, I don't want to give the impression that mares walk around with a light switch on their side, where if we flip it, they're fertile, and if we flip it the other way, they're not fertile. As most of us know, or as everybody knows, horses are seasonal breeders, and that is controlled by photoperiod. And a lot of us will actually try to get our mares bred outside of their natural breeding season. For example, a lot of us like to see our mares get pregnant in February or March. So we like our foals to be born as early as possible in the calendar year. But we need to realize that if we leave it up to Mother Nature and leave it up to the mare and stallion, that is not necessarily when they would choose to become pregnant. So we're manipulating their reproductive cycle, and we do that via photoperiod. But it's very important, though, that we prepare both the stallion and the mare nutritionally and physiologically for them to become pregnant. And that applies whether we're going to do an early breeding season, or we're going to, try and breed our mares in what we would consider to be the more natural breeding season. So it's very important, and we mentioned body condition score. That's generally going to be controlled by protein and energy intake. If they're skinny, feed them more. If they're fat, feed them less, if possible. Now, when you got mares out on excellent pasture, that can be a challenge, because some of these mares can get a little over-conditioned on nothing but grass. And that also underscores the next thing I'm going to say, and that is that mineral and vitamin nutrition, it absolutely does play a very critical role in breeding success, not only for the mare to become pregnant, not only for the stallion to produce viable sperm, but also for the health and the viability of the foal as it develops in utero. So we can look at a brood mare, for example, and say, okay, she's in moderate body condition, so that's just what we want. So that must mean her protein and her energy intake are adequate. And 90% of the time, that's going to be a true statement. What you can't tell, however, is she getting enough zinc? Is she getting enough copper? Is she getting enough selenium? Is she getting enough vitamin E, etc.? The minerals in the vitamins, or the mins and vits, as we say. It's important to note that a mare's vitamin E requirement is actually greatest during gestation. So she needs more vitamin E when she's pregnant than she does when she's lactating. And likewise, some of your trace minerals, zinc and copper, she actually needs more when she's pregnant than she does when she's lactating. And why is that? She needs it in order for the foal to develop adequately. So if you don't feed the pregnant broodmare correctly, your foal's going to be born behind the 8-ball, figuratively and literally. Also, if your mare is open and you're getting her ready for breeding season, those same nutrients play a very critical role. You not only have to make sure she's in adequate or a moderate body condition, you also want to absolutely ensure that her mineral and vitamin requirements are being met in order for all of her reproductive systems and tissues to work properly and be as healthy as they can.
Well, I think a lot of what you just said, Bill, applies to the stallion as well. You know, we can't forget that spermatogenesis is a process that starts 55 days in advance of when we've collected that semen. So we have to make sure that we're feeding him correctly to make sure that we're developing the sperm cell and that we can get the right sperm cell out. So again, advanced planning becomes very important. You know, and I think also being aware of what semen quality that stallion is producing so that you could feed and correct his semen quality becomes really important.
Yeah. And then, I mean, coming back to the original question too, like what can we do to increase our chances of breeding success? And from the stallion side, I mean, of course, that's a lot of what we do over here at MPTI is semen work.
Yeah.
But a breeding soundness exam, doing that pretty early in the season affords you some time to make some changes if there's a nutritional problem.
Well, I'd like to say, I think not just a breeding soundness exam, but doing an in-depth, deep dive of that breeding soundness exam. So getting not just the simple field exam done, but also looking at those semen characteristics, some of the things that we do here, understanding more details about that will really help you prepare correctly. And we'll dive into that in the second seminar, but I think that kind of gives us more of a chance of success. And knowing what you're up against, you know, preparing by understanding, by doing an in-depth semen analysis, you can prepare for the type of our assisted reproductive technology or the type of live cover that's going to best serve your mare. What's going to give you the highest odds of getting that foal on the ground?
So as a mare owner, that's what I should be asking my stallion owner for, correct?
That's right.
Before I choose that stallion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. And past success does not always breed future success because something might have happened in the off season that will have changed his fertility.
Interesting. All right. My next question that I have, does changing their diet while in foal, it would be a mare, while in foal affect the fetus in any way? And do I need to change my mare's feed during pregnancy?
Excellent question. Actually incorporates several points. So it's one of those, it sounds like a simple question, but complicated answer. In a nutshell, the answer is yes. It can affect the health of the foal if you change the diet of the mare. But some of the more common issues that I run into when I'm helping other people, you know, with their breeding programs and their nutritional management is, you know, the old adage when a mare's pregnant, or, you know, she's eating for two now, you know, so, you know, we have to make sure that we're getting enough food into her. And the truth of the matter is that during gestation or during pregnancy, protein and energy requirements really don't increase that much, okay? Do they increase, you know, above maintenance? In other words, if she wasn't pregnant, the answer is yes, they do increase, but they only increase, you know, 20 to 25%, which, that's not a small number, but it's at the end of the day, from a practical standpoint, it's still very easy to meet that increased protein and energy requirement for a mare. In fact, many mares on good quality pasture, on pasture alone, will still get enough protein and energy to meet the requirement even when they're pregnant. Okay. But the thing to remember is when a mare is pregnant, you absolutely have to make sure that her mineral and vitamin requirements are met, as I indicated just a little bit earlier. In fact, some of her mineral and vitamin requirements during pregnancy are greater than they are during lactation. So ensuring an adequate mineral vitamin intake, and you can do that, from a Triple Crown feed standpoint. Let's say for discussion purposes, I do have a mare and she's maintaining her body condition on nothing but, pasture. So how do I make sure she's getting enough mins and vits? You can use the Triple Crown balancer, feed her a pound of that a day. That's not going to add enough protein and energy to really affect things one way or the other, but it is going to make sure that she gets all the minerals and vitamins that she needs, or actually more accurately, that developing foal needs in order to develop sound and correctly. Now, when we get towards the last trimester, especially as we get closer to parturition, or closer to foaling, as you know, that's when the growth of the foal really accelerates. And that's when the greatest increase in mineral requirements and protein and energy requirements is going to kick in. That is also the most critical time in terms of any change to the dietary program. So you really want to make sure that you're already meeting the mineral and vitamin requirements of the mare throughout gestation. You don't want to wait until you're 9 to 10 months into pregnancy and go, oops, I just remembered, I need to make sure she's getting enough mins and vits. Okay. You need to make sure all the way through in order to support, adequate skeletal development, muscle development of the foal in utero. Now, sometimes mares, for multiple reasons, will drop body condition score a little bit right towards the end of pregnancy. And people tend to panic a little bit when that happens. And the most common reason for that to happen is the mare's appetite drops off. And one of the reasons it drops off is simply due to abdominal space. She's carrying 120 pounds of extra foal, let alone everything that goes along with that. So her appetite reduces a bit, so she might start to drop body condition a bit. So, people say, oh, I better, start feeding her more and help get her body condition score back. That's where you need to be cautious. And the reason being is that, as we mentioned, it's that point in time when fetal growth is at its greatest rate. And if we start increasing protein and energy intake of the mare, like the last 60 days of pregnancy, 45, 60 days, one of two things is going to happen. One is you will improve the body condition score of the mare, which that's fine. However, the other thing that might happen is that extra protein and energy intake won't do anything for the mare's body condition, but it will continue to accelerate the growth of the fetus even more. And that's what you don't want, because I've actually seen situations where that has been done. Mare's body condition dropped a little bit. Protein, total feed intake, primarily in the form of grain, was increased. And what essentially happened was we had a foal born that weighed 175 pounds. Okay. That is a huge foal. And obviously that foaling was associated with some difficulties. So unfortunately, we can't tell with each mare, what's going to happen. Is she going to increase her body condition score, or are we simply going to, is it simply going to result in a large foal being born? If you've got a history on the mare, multiple foals, you might know the answer to that. But if you don't have a history on the mare, you don't know which way that's going to go, in which case then just keep feeding her the way you've been feeding her. Once that foal is born, her appetite will come back. You'll have plenty of time, to put her back in good body condition. It's one of those things, if you're doing everything correctly, don't panic, okay? Take a deep breath, relax, it'll be okay, So that's one thing to keep in mind, but you really don't want to be changing things around very much, especially during the last trimester. So that's the take-home message. Okay.
Bill, and I want to go back to the first trimester, actually, a little bit of time, and even that first month, you might not even know she's pregnant. You might hope she is, but you might not know. And nutrition can have a really big impact at that point because it can affect that maternal recognition of pregnancy. If she's pregnant, it can affect that blastocyst development. So that early embryo, when it's just starting to develop, it's highly dependent on its environment. And if that environment isn't good and sound, she could lose that pregnancy very easily. So I think we really need to consider that it's all the way from the time she's starting to get pregnant to the time she foals. But also, it can affect long-term fertility of that foal because gonadal development can be impacted by poor nutrition very early in that pregnancy. And so we have to consider that you can have long-term impacts of nutrition on that animal reproductively in the next generation.
Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing here too is that foals have a placenta that's known as a diffuse placenta, and it's one of the most inefficient forms of placentation in the animal kingdom. So having proper nutrition for that mare, it's very important because they can only take up so much nutrients through that diffuse placentation. But this also leads to other downstream effects, things like epigenetic changes, which are genes that can be turned on and off by environmental factors, and this can happen in utero. One of my favorite examples of this is the Dutch famine, where during the World War, the Dutch population was restricted to less than 500 calories a day. And they went back some years later and found people that were in utero during that time frame and discovered that they were morbidly obese. So while they were in utero, genes had switched on saying like, okay, you can survive on glass. So this is something that's also been replicated in animal models and has an impact on your foal as well if you're not giving the mare proper nutrition.
Yeah, so if you have a mare that's or an animal that's an easy keeper, it might be because that mare didn't get adequate nutrition during your development. Could be. So pretty important, and I guess we'll touch on that a little bit more during the mare section. But.
Yeah, well, as Bill alluded to earlier, there's a lot of answers to this question. Another one is the quality of colostrum. So proper nutrition, feeding the mare during that last, push in pregnancy has an impact on the quality of your colostrum.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. Next question. And this is our final question that we have. We'll take some from the audience. Do vaccines affect the fetus, mare, or stallion?
Well, I guess we'll take a stab at that one.
Sure.
A good quality vaccine that is produced should not affect that. In fact, a lot of times you want to have vaccinations because otherwise, if you have a fever in a mare, for example, you can increase your chance of abortion by up to 80%. So you want to make sure that she's happy, and you want to avoid some of that the rhino vaccine will actually prevent some of that abortion. So you actually are encouraged to give some vaccines during pregnancy, and we can talk about that. And also you have antibody transfer to via the colostrum for some diseases. So we want to make sure that she has a very healthy immune response going into her.
again, that kind of comes back to that diffuse placentation. Because they don't get antibiotics transferred through the mother like humans do, that colostrum is vital to that foal.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and also from a stallion perspective, so we'll talk about this a little more in the next seminar, but making sure that you're protecting your stallion from infections. So vaccinating them before the breeding season.
Well, and some of the STDs that can be transferred during breeding.
Yes. Infections have a measurable negative impact on sperm quality, and protecting them from that is important.
And I think there are vaccines that are sold as safe during pregnancy. And so, being sure that you buy a vaccine that's appropriate and make sure you consult with your veterinarian on that. Bill, what else do you have to add to that one? I'm sure you have some other interesting stories on vaccination and pregnancy.
Well, really what we're discussing is immune function. And when we vaccinate, we stimulate an immune response, and therefore we generate antibodies. And obviously the immune response to the mare is going to have a direct impact on the quality of the colostrum that she produces. So not only from a vaccination standpoint can we affect that, but it reminded me of another important point, and that is that, the majority of the horse's immune system is found in the intestine.
Yep.
And so this is another area where nutrition can play an extremely important role rather, in immune function of the mare, and then that immune function of the mare will play over into the quality of the colostrum. And so then when the foal gets that colostrum and picks up that immunity from the colostrum, it can make a big difference in what kind of start that foal gets in life as well. And by feeding different digestive aids, specifically, prebiotics specifically.
Yes.
Now, notice I didn't say probiotics, although they can come into play. I used the term prebiotic, such as mannan oligosaccharides, fructan oligosaccharides, things of this sort, will actually stimulate the immune system of the gut, improve IgG production, and then that can translate right into the colostrum. And there's been a number of research studies that have been reported in the literature that have actually demonstrated that. By feeding the pregnant mare these prebiotics, you improve the quality of the colostrum. So something to make sure that you consider, in the feeding of your pregnant broodmare.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right, so we have a couple of questions from some audience members. So does triple crown growth have all of the trace minerals and vitamins in it for the pregnant mare?
Okay. Yes, it does, but there's a but. Okay, and the but is it depends upon how much you feed. When we look at commercial feeds, regardless of really which company is formulating it and manufacturing it, most of your standard type diets, such as Triple Crown growth, and Mandy's probably going to slap me through the computer screen for calling that a standard feed, because it's a little bit more than a standard feed. But the point I'm trying to make, though, is that a lot of these products are formulated such that you need to be feeding 5, 6, or 7 pounds a day in order to meet the mineral vitamin requirement of the mare.
Wow.
So one of the things we mentioned previously is, what if I have a mare that's on good quality pasture and or good quality hay, and I'm trying to maintain her in a moderate body condition. So at the end of the day, I realize that I'm only feeding this mare 3 pounds of Triple Crown growth. That's not enough to meet the mineral and vitamin requirement. So if I fed her 6 pounds of Triple Crown growth, then I'd end up with an overconditioned mare. I use the term I'd end up with a basketball with 4 feet hanging off of it, and I don't want that, okay? So then how do I make sure, though, that she's going to get an adequate mineral and vitamin intake? And one of the things we do, again, using the Triple Crown products, is we would take the Triple Crown balancer and feed her between 1/2 pound and 1 pound of that per day. So that in combination with the Triple Crown growth would ensure that then all of her mineral and vitamins requirements are being met. Now, if I've got a mare that is in fact getting 6 or 7 pounds of Triple Crown growth per day, then that's all she needs, plus forage. Okay, remember everything. I'm assuming that everything's going to be forage based. Okay, that's if you want the best prebiotic for a horse, you know what it is? It's pasture. Okay, so make sure that forage makes up the foundation of the feeding program. And then with something like Triple Crown growth, you're ensuring amino acid balance, amino acid quality in your mineral and vitamin intake. But yes, everything is in growth, including those prebiotics and probiotics and digestive aids that we discussed. But always remember, you need to be feeding enough in order to meet the requirement. And if you're not feeding enough, then use a supplement such as Triple Crown Balancer to make sure that your intake is adequate.
Well, Billy, you mentioned pasture, and I think one of the things those folks from Kentucky pride themselves on are the limestone caves that are underneath those pastures and provide really nice calcium in their soil and in their plants, in their grass, to provide great nutrition to those mares and to those growing foals.
That is correct. And, one of the things that you don't hear people talk much about, though, in Kentucky is that, the calcium phosphorus ratio of a lot of that pasture will vary.
Yes.
And it's not uncommon at all for the fall of the year, usually somewhere around October, plus or minus, a few weeks. Where in some of these farms, the cal-phos ratio in that pasture will actually invert. And it's not because phosphorus levels are changing, it's because calcium levels are decreasing. And you have to remember that grass grows for grass's sake. Okay. So the horse takes advantage of it, but if I'm a blade of bluegrass out there in the pasture, I'm growing for me. I'm not growing for the horse. So what happens in the fall is the pasture grass starts to prepare for winter dormancy. And so that's when a lot of these mineral levels can change. But the reason I bring this up is what happens in October if you're in the thoroughbred breeding business in central Kentucky. One of the things that happens is your foals have just been weaned or in the process of being weaned, and they're turned out on that pasture with an inverted cal-phos ratio. That is a recipe for skeletal disorders. So it's another situation where you have to make very sure that your horses, including your weanlings and your foals, are receiving some supplemental nutrition to make sure that your mineral levels are adequate and your mineral ratios are adequate as well. We don't see that so much in warm season grasses like we do down here in Georgia or Texas, but in the cool season grasses we'll tend to do that more so than the warm season grasses.
Yeah, so I guess that's where your growth comes into play too.
Absolutely.
Is important.
Okay, we have another question here from Kelly. She says, I have been told lysine is very important for mares and foals. Is it just as important as zinc and copper?
So is lysine as important as zinc and copper? Yes, from a physiological standpoint, it absolutely is. Now, when we talk about amino acids, and that's what lysine is, it's an amino acid. So sometimes you'll hear people talk about, protein content. You'll hear people talk about protein quality. You hear people talk about amino acid balance. How do all those things, mesh together? Well, amino acids make up proteins, okay? And as long as you've got an adequate amount of what we call the dietary essential amino acids, then your horse should be able to produce and supply all of its body tissues with enough protein, enough amino acid / protein in order to remain healthy. Now, the first limiting amino acid, say that fast 10 times. So the first limiting amino acid for the horse is lysine. So if you have enough lysine in the diet to meet your horse's lysine requirement, then 98% of the time, there's going to be enough of all the other amino acids in an adequate amount to also meet their requirements. So that's why there's so much emphasis placed on lysine. So if you don't have enough lysine, your horse cannot make the proteins in its body at an adequate rate and an adequate amount. Now, when you talk about proteins in the body, most people think about muscle, okay? But protein, all your hormones, testosterone, estrogen, insulin, thyroid, et cetera, those are all proteins, okay? Your bone contains a lot of protein. Your connective tissue contains a lot of protein. Your brain, even though we can argue some horses don't have one, that still requires a lot of protein, okay? So lysine is, the limiting factor in the production and the synthesis of all those proteins in the body. So it's extremely important. So yes, is it as important as zinc and copper? Absolutely. Maybe even more so. But if you're using a good quality feed, Mandy mentioned Triple Crown Growth. If you're feeding Triple Crown Growth, the lysine level, the lysine balance with the other amino acids is formulated into that product. So again, if you're feeding enough of that Triple Crown Growth with or without the Triple Crown Balancer, then your lysine requirement will be met, which means all your other amino acids will be met, and your mare or stallion or weanling, will be good to go. Okay.
Awesome. Any other questions? Yes. We have another one from Kelsey. Does senior contain all the vitamins and minerals? I feed the recommended poundage for my horse.
Okay. Similar to Triple Crown Growth, yes, Triple Crown Senior will also satisfy all of the amino acid and mineral requirements. When I was raising thoroughbred foals, they all got fed Triple Crown Senior. Okay, so even though we called it Senior, I've joked many times it's the most misnamed product out there. Because it can be fed to basically any stage of the horse. So we used to use it, for our pregnant mares as well as our growing horses. So yes.
I think we have one more.
Yeah, last question here from Michelle. If you have a mare that is a little thin during the last 60 days and you'll have to increase feed for lactation, how quickly can you do that, and when do you start increasing the feed?
Okay. This question actually falls right into the discussion or the points I was making earlier, in that while that mare is pregnant, especially during the last 45 to 60 days, you want to be very cautious about trying to increase her body condition score, because you don't know if she's going to respond by increasing her body condition, or if she's going to respond by producing an even larger foal. And birth weight and foaling issues are directly related. So, we want a well-formed, we want a good body weight foal, but we don't want a very large foal to be born. Which, it's another interesting point, because I've run into breeders in my career where they actually thought that they wanted large birth weights, because the thought was the larger the foal, the larger the horse. That's not true. Okay. The size of the foal is going to be determined by the DNA. Okay. When that sperm and that egg come together, bingo, that determines the size of the horse. Okay. That eventually is going to be produced. So you don't want to accelerate things so that your foal is born ready to be bridled and saddled. Okay. Keep the birth weight, within reason. Okay. So that being said, then, okay, let's now, for discussion purposes, say, okay, our foal is on the ground, our mare begins to lactate, but she's underweight. So that's when people start to panic a little bit, because they know that her protein and energy requirement are going to increase. Her protein and energy requirement are going to be highest when she reaches peak lactation. Peak lactation occurs somewhere around 6 to 8 weeks after foaling. So you've got 1.5 to 2 months after that foal is born before she's going to reach peak lactation. So after foaling, okay, you want to make sure, I use the term all systems are go. Okay, you want to make sure that her appetite's good. You want to make sure everything's going through her digestive system well. She's not going to colic on you, etc. So once she's eating good, you know that her intestines are working normally again, you can start increasing her feed intake pretty rapidly at that point, as long as she'll eat as much as you're trying to put into her. And most of these mares, if they're a little bit under condition, their appetite's normally pretty good. But this is another situation, though, where the quality of her diet is going to make your life a whole lot easier. In other words, remember what we said, forage makes up the foundation of the diet, and that is exceptionally true for a lactating mare. So if I've got, some hay that's 5% protein, and low energy, and that's what I'm feeding her, hoping that she's going to gain weight, it ain't going to happen, folks. Okay. So you want to make sure that either your pasture quality is good and or your hay quality is good. And then once you've got that established, then use a high quality feed, something like Triple Crown Growth, for example, and you can feed her enough of that to not only to support her milk production, but then also help improve her body condition score at the same time. Okay.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. Is there anything you guys would like to add before we adjourn for the evening?
No, we look forward to the next 2, but thank you for putting this together, Mandy.
Well, thank you. You're welcome. This has been a lot of fun. So we will have 2 other seminars that come along after this one. We'll have a Stallion Success on November 19th, and we'll also have our third one will be our Mare Success, and that will be on December 10th. That's a Thursday, and that will be from 6 to 7 p.m. Central Time. That's 4 Pacific, 5 Mountain, 6 Central, 7 Eastern. And we record these, so they will be available up on the Triple Crown YouTube channel, and we'll also put links to them on Facebook. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm the one that emailed you, and reach out to our 800 number with Triple Crown, and reach out to the website.
Find us on our website or email us.
Or
right here
Facebook,
from you.
Yeah, Facebook too. So we appreciate you joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.